My name is Mark Hilton. I'm from Santa Cruz Software. I'm the founder and CEO of Santa Cruz Software. My guests today are Sylvie Fodor and Alex Hubard. Sylvie, why don't you give a quick introduction to yourself?
Yes, thank you. So my name is Sylvie Fodor. I'm the executive director of CEPIC. CEPIC is a trade organization based in Brussels and which defends the rights of visual right holders in the largest sense, mostly companies, content producers. So visual content matters.
And Alex?
Yes, hi, thank you for having me. So I'm the VP of Product and AI at IntelligenceBank. So we're a digital asset management software that specializes in highly regulated industries, so including workflows and marketing compliance.
Today, we're here to talk about localization as a brand strategy. So, as opposed to not just translation as part of your brand strategy. And I think to frame this, at least the way we've thought about it is, in today's world of global markets and the need to reach, broadly those global markets through social channels and all these other digital channels, and through the growth of AI automation, we asked the question: Are we going too fast with respect to actually being able to talk to our customers? We can throw content out to them, but are we really doing a good job of talking to them in the locale where they consume their content and in a way that's really meaningful to them? And so one of the questions we asked associated with that was, translating words from English to French, French to English. Um, is that fully meaningful? And so, do we need to do something different in terms of adapting it for the local consumption of consumers? And so that's the question. And so I guess the first thing I will throw out to you guys is, from your perspective, from your industry perspective, what's the difference between translation and localization, and does it matter?
Yeah, well, of course, I think it matters very much. But I'm seeing this from my perspective as a, let's say, French person, and which where English is not the native language, and we get a lot of English nowadays, including in advertising. The slogans, of many logos are just in English. And I speak fluently three languages, so I don't have a problem with languages at all. I'm actually can understand also a lot of other languages, so that's not the problem. The problem is that indeed you feel a little bit, and I'm speaking here as a consumer, not in my function as executive director of CEPIC. You feel a little bit overwhelmed by all this English slogan. I understand it makes it easier for the brands, but I'm not so sure about the rest. And I also understand the consumers will probably get used to it, but I'm not so sure. Or maybe it's the future, but then it's a sad future, let's say.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think translation, it makes a market understand you, but it's really that localization that makes a market trust you. And Sylvie, I think as a consumer and as somebody in your role, you well and truly understand that. And you can put words over an image, but that can read as still foreign or careless if it's not matched to the local market. And I think translation is that visible 10%, but it's the visual and the cultural cues that drive that trust. And that's that sort of invisible majority of a brand and of the work of marketing in local markets. So people consciously read the words, but they subconsciously read those images as well.
Do you guys have any stories of serious misses in your experience? I mean, I'm not so sure in Australia because of a lot of the stuff starts off in English, but clearly there are cultural differences between any of the countries, even if we have the same language. So, do you guys have any stories of like really horrible misses that you? I think, particularly from a perspective of a dam provider, you must talk to a lot of marketing organizations, and there's probably some fun stories about those kind of misses.
Absolutely. And I think, there's still cultural nuances, even when you share a language, like in particular, and growing up in the US and now working in Australia. Australia is very laid back, even in professional settings, and that can be off-putting to American audience. And as a DAM provider, we see it all the time, especially with even templating software and creative software as well, where people don't think about the local market. So Australia is very diverse. We look at white as a color of purity, of cleanliness in the West, but it's mourning in parts of Asia, and we have a very large Asian population. So I think that you have, models that don't reflect the local population, and you see those lagging symbols more in engagement and in complaints from those regional teams and backlash. So yeah, you do see it still quite a bit.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, you know what? I've never been to Australia, but I can completely see that. It's probably very different from the United States, although you speak English, and that must be terrible, I think, in some instances. But what I wanted to say is go back to the one question that you asked, whether you think AI is going too quickly, because obviously with translation, but also with images, we can do a lot more than we could do a couple of years ago. And indeed, this is something that we have to look at, that because it can be the case that it will go, what we mentioned just before, will get even worse. And since you've been asking for an example, I have an example which is a couple of years back, but that will probably get worse with AI now. And it's about wine. It's about wine, and it's a story of a photographer. It's a true story that I read a couple of years ago, and about it's a photographer from the north of France who arriving in his airport. So it's probably Lille. I remember it was the north of France, so it's probably Lille. And he sees huge posters, advertising poster in his homeland airport, advertising for the wines of the region. I didn't even know they had wine in North France, but that's everything is possible. And so there are a couple of winemakers in the north of France. It's just that he lives in this region. He's a photographer and simply doesn't recognize the wine in question. It's very hilly and everything's flat in the north of France. And after some research, he realized that the images were showing some places in California. So they used images from California to advertise for the local wine. And what makes the story worse is that it was the regional council that did that. So it was their initiative, and they went to get the images, and instead of going to a French library with very local pictures, they went for the easy path. And so basically, they were advertising for their flat wine plantations with hills from California. And I think with AI, this example will only get worse, because quite obviously, generative AI will be used. It will not be even any translation anymore, or any places in the world. It will be nowhere. And some wine plantation. I think, unfortunately, this will. I'm afraid that we will see more of this by low budgets.
I have a story from my time when I worked at Adobe. I was the vice president of product management for Adobe, and it was when Adobe was just releasing. I was running the InDesign team at Adobe, and when it was first released, and we had gone through this effort to create a whole completely different version of InDesign for Japan. It was designed and built for the way the Japanese structure their magazines and layout and so on. And we were super excited. We spent millions and millions of dollars just to target the Japanese market. And we went to Japan. We introduced the product with all the same marketing messages that we used everywhere else in the world. And we thought Japan's going to be so excited to see this product because it's built just for them. Launched the product, and it was a big thud. And we worked for literally a year trying to figure out why the product landed with this a big thud. And it turned out that the Japanese publishing and layout market had a different perspective of what was important. And for them, we kept messaging around that we can replace typography because of the way the technology was built. And it turned out there was a whole industry of typographers that we were basically saying, we're going to put you out of business and you don't need this whole group of people. And as soon as we figured out that was and the Japanese were very polite. They didn't really want to explain how, in detail what was. Anyways, we figured it out, completely reoriented our marketing messages, and then InDesign in Japan was a huge success. But it was just, again, this American mindset that we applied to another country that we clearly didn't understand. But it ended up being a happy ending for Adobe anyway. Let's start talking about what actually goes on today. If you think about a new campaign starting in France and going to the rest of the world, do you think, I think based on our conversation so far, I think the answer is no, but do you think design teams design with the intent for the rest of the world? Or do you think that they just build it for the home market and then they're told they have to publish it in 5 different countries and then they just rush around to try and get it done? What's your thought on that?
This is the thing, is that it's already happening. Already happen now. If I take Europe, you already clearly see when you travel around, like I do, some campaigns which are run by some companies, and they use one picture, one model, and sometimes they don't even change the wording. It depends on the country, but for example, in Germany, very often they still keep the English wording. In France, they will be a little bit more careful, so it's already happening. So I don't really see how you can turn this around. I don't see how you can turn this around because this is already happening. So I don't really see what can be done about it. I'm not a marketer. I defend visual content, so I see that from this perspective. I'm not managing the budget of a marketing team.
Yeah, I think from the marketing perspective, at least in my opinion, and most of the people we talk to, they are retrofitting, even if they have the best of intentions. And it's especially true, talking about AI, there's a desire to get campaigns out there quickly, to move fast. So you tend to start with the home market first and then do that scrambling at launch with, a hero image, specifically when it comes to visuals. So, that localization, which really should be, cross-functional effort, including the local market, it gets treated as this one-off project, very last minute, instead of a capability that needs to be, again, brought to market with the idea of who is your audience, talking again about that InDesign moment in Japan, understanding what works in a country, what's going to adapt and what's not. So I do think that marketing teams scramble. More often than not, though, at least when we speak to our clients and talk to them about templating and talk to them about the importance of metadata in the DAM, they do tend to get a process and learn. So I have a little hope that we will get there.
So actually, yeah, as somebody who is a provider of DAM, why don't you talk a little bit about how a DAM can actually make this work? How can a DAM facilitate localization as opposed to just translation?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think if you're not using your DAM well, you're just thinking about it like a smart folder. And I think people think, oh, I'll just put more files in there. But that's actually how localization gets worse, because you're going to have more variants you'll have no relationships and you'll have no source of truth. I think to make that localization scalable, you need four things that a DAM can provide. So one is that master variant relationship. So one approved creative concept linked to market specific variants. So doing your research upfront, ensuring there's that master template so that nothing's orphaned. Having the integration with like web to print in creative software where variants are generated within an approved system and they're not hand built over and over again. Meta-driven automation. So that's ensuring that the right asset is selected and substituted by the rules. You're not hunting for it. And then governance. So, the right asset needs to reach the right market. And we see this happen over and over again. And, it needs to have not just that adaptability and that cultural awareness, but it's also, ensuring that the usage and the license is intact as well. So storing files, if that's all you're doing with your DAM, that's going to scale your problem. I think if you're modeling relationships between files, that's going to absolutely scale localization.
Sylvie, it seems like if we're going to get cultural representation, it's going to depend on local sources. Access to local sources, and in your view, is the industry set up to supply, broadly these global brands with local sources of content that can be used in these marketing campaigns?
Yes, I think so. I think so. So, of course, from an outside perspective, most people will only know Getty Images and Shutterstock as a source of images, but and they're going to merge soon. so, that's going to be a monopoly. But nevertheless, they work with content providers. And usually the picture editors are aware of what which we're just talking about. I mean, in terms of images, while Alex was speaking, I was thinking of all the, in terms of images, the people, when the images represent people in an advertising. And that's something very striking that you see sometimes, maybe it's low budget ads, I don't know, where you see that clearly they haven't changed the people in the advertising. They bought some footage, some really, very cheap footage. And a black man, so we need to be, we need to be inclusive and non-biased and everything. But a black man in the United States doesn't look like a black man in France. And if you're French, you see it right away. You see it. It's simply not a middle class black man doesn't see like a middle class white man, and same thing for women and for children, for anything. So that's but most picture editors know it. So they will make the efforts, I think, to get the diversity into their collections, because for me, speaking of diversity, it's not so much a question of bias as a question of being authentic with what you are representing. You need to represent the societies as they are, right? With all the various people who live in these societies. And so this is why you need here, especially for images of people, to be very careful. And to go back to your questions, yes, I think it's possible. So the clients should need to be aware of it. It's possible, and also in the same collections. So it's out there. The imagery is out there in any case.
So let's switch to maybe this super sexy topic of metadata. It feels like, well, you tell me, what is metadata's role in all of this?
I think metadata is what makes a visual machine actionable. So I think if you have local, maybe to say another way, if you have local aware metadata, that's what's going to enable your teams to auto route, auto substitute, and enforce rights and detect those problems at scale. So everything that Sylvie's talking about, being able to go to the French market or another European market and understand this is not the correct visual. This does not represent the people. The even things from background, what is green spaces, whether an area is flat or not. And I think that, as we use more generative AI in visuals, that becomes more of a risk. So metadata can actually help you and protect your teams and protect your brands. And, at IntelligenceBank, we work with a lot of regulated industries, and we push that metadata further by pairing it with AI that can read the image content. So your objects, what's your on-screen text, brand color, and logo presence. So metadata isn't just a descriptor, it can also be an enforcer. And for, I think, marketing teams, and again, trying to move at that global scale, trying to keep up with the pace of AI, what's changing is that localization metadata is becoming increasingly important, and it's actually becoming critical infrastructure, and it should be critical infrastructure if you want to succeed as a global brand.
Well, thank you, Alex. I'm really happy to hear you say this because we think CEPIC at metadata is very important. I just wrote a letter yesterday to the European Commission. They were working on this code of practice, and we emphasize the importance of metadata, and we would like to strengthen its position in legislation. That it keeps stuck, that's a problem that is being striped and everything. So we would like to strengthen this position because I completely 100% agree with what you just said. It's maybe not a sexy subject, but it's a critical subject. And what is a picture without words? Nothing. You need words for a picture.
Yeah. So Sylvie, what rights and metadata standards do you think should travel with imagery and documents so that this localization concept doesn't break licensing or whatever downstream? What are the standards that we should be keeping our eyes on?
Yeah, we're pushing for IPTC because it's a widely used standard. It's very easy to implement. It's used in Adobe, from the start. It's being read by platforms such as Google or Meta. They already read it. We think it should be one of the recognized standards next to other standards out there. But for the image industry, it's the most important.
Are there any other ones that?
Then IPTC. Well, we're pushing for IPTC, but there are other standards. Yes, of course. For this to describe the data, or
to make sure that it's people are at the content, the knowledge of the content travels with the image, the licensing travels with the image, the rights travel with the image. Is it the authenticity of the
okay. Well, there are other. We also are working on C2PA. Is what you mean, but for me, it's not. You can call it a standard, but it's about provenance. So to check the provenance of the image, but I don't think that's really related to this topic. If it's about description, we're pushing for IPTC. Yeah. There's also JPEG Trust, which is not released yet. So that's why for the moment, it's not yet really as widely implemented.
Let's talk about, we touched a little bit on AI. So maybe this is out to both of you. How do you guys see AI generated imagery changing this whole idea of localization? Is it a help? Does it make it harder? Does it make it more complicated? What are your thoughts?
It makes it impossible.
Makes it impossible.
For imagery, impossible. The images look the same. And people may not be able to use them very well. Maybe I'm a little bit, but most of the things I see online is not very good.
I think it's important to make a distinction between like image generated AI image generated content as opposed to AI for helping things. I'll give you an example. At Santa Cruz Software, we have a product called Banners UI. We use AI to intelligently relocate objects. So if you're doing a social media post that's got, it's a skyscraper or a long skinny landscape, but you're starting with a square Photoshop file, you have to move objects around. So we don't change the content of the image using AI. We change the shape and the size and the location using AI. AI, we also look at within our system. We have a translation and localization engine. We use AI to translate the words that we then present to the user, and then we let them look at the words that are translated using AI, and then they can make changes to themselves, and then they can save that back into translation memory. So there's this sort of handoff of, you start with AI generated translation, but then you overlay a human to actually make sure that it makes sense for that language, and then you save that language back to the system so that the next time you run into it. So I think there's lots of different ways you can use AI. It's not just creating really weird looking images.
Yeah. No. Okay. In this case, yeah, I agree with you. Yes. Yes. I was referring to generative AI.
Yeah.
Not to this type of AI as a tool. Yeah, it's great. Yeah, it can help. Yes.
Yeah, we see that a lot with our customers and marketing teams. Again, you brought up a great example with language, and I think there is the potential to use AI really well. I think to some of the points Sylvie's made, you do have to be aware of cultural fidelity, involve local teams when you're looking at semantic intent. But certainly for language translation, having that memory is going to be very important, because you can do a direct translation, but it might be taken very differently in a local market. So you're using AI to do that initial bit, and then having somebody review that content is really well. Another example that we see a lot is accessibility. So not just talking about text and moving text around, that's very important and a great templating feature, but then as well ensuring that something using AI and say, is this up to the accessibility standards for this industry, this market, the audience we want to have. So that's something where I think AI has been a huge source of help.
Let's talk a little bit about, I guess, implementation. Who should be the owner within an organization, a brand, who should actually own localization, visual localization, a language localization? Is that the design team? Is that their responsibility? Is it the responsibility of the team, the regional team in the field? Do we have to have localization specialists within different organizations? What's your opinion about, ultimately, who do you point the finger at?
I think it probably depends on the organization where it's being made. Because it's the size of the organization, I guess, how they are organized locally. But indeed, if it's possible for the organization to give it to the local team, I would say that it's probably the safest solution with this, narrow task of localizing the content.
Alex?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, it's a shared operating model that has clear roles. And I do think it's organization dependent as well. But design needs to own this system, the adaptable system. The localization specialists, they need to own, again, that linguistic and that cultural fidelity. The regional team needs to own the market truth, and they have to hold the line and have the veto power on, does this content actually belong here? Is it going to work in this market? And then, of course, you have the dam itself, which the dam has to own the enforceability so that the ownership isn't just a goodwill gesture. There's actual governance behind it.
Here's a tricky point, a tricky question, I suppose, for Alex. So the dam has all this great metadata, and then somebody grabs an asset and sucks it into a design tool. Whose job is it to make sure that what comes out of that design tool and then ends up back in the dam? We didn't lose things. Where's the handshake, and what sort of handshakes do we need between a dam and a creative tool?
Yeah, and I think historically this is exactly where that process breaks. So you get somebody that pulls something into InDesign, and now it's detached. It's detached from its rights, the brand rules, approved variants. I don't know that the answer is to police that. I think when we look at the integration, like for us with web to print, that's all about removing the seam and allowing customers to move faster. So, using something like Linker UI to keep that asset live linked to the dam. So you have that metadata, that brand control flowing into something like an InDesign, and having something like Print UI, that allows regional teams to produce localized brand compliant collateral within, again, that approved system instead of recreating it off to the side. So there's a massive risk of localization failing at a handoff. But the answer to me isn't having a better handoff. It's not having a handoff. It's keeping everything tethered to the same system so that that governance is there all the way from variation to print.
Yeah, I agree. I think I guess we're sort of in the middle. We're not Adobe. We don't make Photoshop and InDesign. We don't make the dam. We help kind of connect those. Although we are stepping more and more, as you pointed out, we have our web to print with Print UI, and so we have a responsibility of making sure that we take what comes from the dam and we, at minimum, retain that. And so when it goes back to the dam or someplace else, that we've maintained all that information, and now it's somebody else's responsibility. And so I think we take that as a very serious part of our job is basically, do no harm to that metadata and move it. But then at the same time, we have a responsibility of when somebody, for example, they do use some sort of generative AI within our part of the workflow, we need to capture that and make sure that that's recognized for the next step. So I think, as an industry, we have responsibilities to keep the information flowing, and it's not just a matter of, well, I have this now and I can forget about what happened behind me and I don't care about what's happening in front of me. We all have to be, good citizens in this workflow. The last question. If you look forward, 5 years from now, what do you see happening? How do you see? What's your hope? What's your vision in 5 years? If you're a multinational global brand and you want to do a new marketing campaign, what's Sylvie? What's your hope and dream for that?
Yeah, my dream, if indeed, and that could be achieved with the help of AI, indeed, is that we start simplifying advertisement for the consumers, and we make them more locally relevant by using some local resources. And indeed, I think AI can help here in making the processes easier and speedier. So yeah, that would be my dream, because I personally I think the world is beautiful because it's diverse, and I learned languages because I wanted to travel, and I loved speaking with other people in different languages, and I would like this to stay this way and not to be completely uniformed. Yeah. So I hope that brands will make this dream also come true somehow. Yeah.
Alex?
Yeah, I think that's very well said. I think in the future, what we want to see is more adaptable by design masters, having that metadata again be the first class discipline, having those rights survive the entire chain, and then keeping those humans in the loop to ensure that we are preserving and maintaining that cultural, that cultural judgment and integrity that's so important. And I think there's a massive role for AI here. I think AI is what's going to help us scale all of this, the routing, tagging, compliance checks. It's not going to scale taste or cultural truth or whether something belongs, but there's certainly an opportunity to use AI to help us get there.
Yep. Great. All right, Sylvie, Alex, thank you so much for spending time with the three of us. I really enjoyed the conversation. I think you guys brought up some great points, and yeah, I look forward to maybe the next time we can get together on a podcast conversation like this.